This series is going to be a demo series about the future of test automation and where Katalon sits in that. So we're going to start today with a broad overview of Katalon and where we sit in the marketplace. To begin, we'll just start with what we're seeing in the market, where we fit and how we help you find solutions that meet the needs that we're starting to see from a day-to-day perspective. Excited for future sessions that are also going to include things like API testing, mobile testing, testing from a leadership perspective with our CTO doing a session as well. So we're really excited about this series, but we'll kick off today with the broad general overview. So I want to start with some of the marketing observations that we're seeing, beginning with increased software complexity that's creating these longer test cycles. So the number one thing I think that we're seeing is this demand for faster delivery without the degradation of quality. So people still want high quality codes, high quality tests, but they want to be able to move fast in doing so. We don't have to read through all of this, but there is a need for something that is easy to find, easy to try, easy to use, that's going to be scalable, that's going to be secure, that's going to be feature rich and comprehensive. So there is a balance that's happening where people say, I need something that's very easy to use, but also comprehensive enough to cover a myriad of test cases. And in getting that, you start to get things like cost reduction, risk reduction, faster velocity, faster releases. So the intent is, how can we help you increase speed, increase quality, reduce risk, and reduce costs? And that's what we're going to cover today. So I'd like to start with what people are actually looking for. What people desire really is this this smooth, predictable, consistent workflow that they can rely on to get things through their pipeline, right? From a development pipeline. So understanding what your requirements are, building those, moving those through the funnel, testing them, getting them into staging, getting them into production. People want this predictable pipeline flow. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is testing has become a long leg in the cycle. And that's for a myriad of different reasons. Some of the main ones that we're seeing is, one, not even having good testing requirements, so unsure exactly what to test to ensure that it gets through. Additionally, things like the increased software complexity, no access to needed environments for testing or needed applications to be able to complete your tests, not having the tooling to be able to test, still having to do a lot of manual testing. About half of testing today is still manual. Struggling to prioritize what to test, understanding your critical workflows, having narrow windows available for testing, and then the consistent maintenance that it takes as you're building these regression suites to go back and fix broken test scripts, broken test cases, or just changes that are needed to be made as adjustments are made in the applications, so that the tests are actually testing whatever those new changes are. So that consistent maintenance is one of the key things we're seeing. What we provide is the ability to get moving, right? We want to have kind of this automation testing wheel that allows you to kind of get rolling with what you're doing. So if you want to truncate or shorten that testing cycle that's going to allow you to move and release faster, Katalon can be that central wheel that will allow you to analyze your test builds, analyze your total builds for what to test, recommend tests, help you provision environments, provide in testing environments, schedule these tests, build these tests quickly, repair tests whenever they're broken using self-healing, and all the way in from the authoring and creation of tests back to the reporting and output. And so where we fit in this life cycle is we want to be built into your actual pipeline, right? So we want to integrate in, if you're using Azure DevOps or Jira or Circle CI or whatever you're using, we actually plug in at that level with our test ops software. And you can use that then to manage and execute these tests, to do anytime testing, to do continuous testing, right? You don't want to have to stop your workflow. You don't want to have to stop your pipeline to be able to test and then restart this automated pipeline. So we actually plug into whatever your automated pipeline is. We allow you to orchestrate your entire test. As you can see from there, we move into Katalon Studio, which is the actual test software itself, which will author your tests, but also allows you to then even execute other tests that you may have already authored. So if you have Selenium tests or Cypress or Appium tests that are already authored, you can utilize that to kick off and run and manage and maintain those tests. And then even for test environments, we have the test cloud, which will allow you to have a hosted environment that you can use and access for anytime testing. So the goal is to help you find this one place in your pipeline when you're trying to fully automate your release pipeline, the one place that tends to be kind of that long leg and the most manual leg, to create the ability to automate that entire stretch of testing so that you can then have a fully automated pipeline. And of course, the benefits that you get from that are what we're seeing in the market, right? Increased speed and accelerated test creation. You're meeting your release SLAs, increased customer satisfaction, increased sales, reduced customer churn, reducing your maintenance time using self-healing, letting you focus on building your new tests, getting better and broader coverage rather than spending administrative time fixing tests that you already built once or twice or three times. Eliminating your pipeline complexity, making sure that you're removing brittle tests and actually having structured, stable tests and testing environments, reducing risk, right? Managing and protecting your data, managing and protecting your customers' data and access to that data, and then overall reduce costs, right? You get more test coverage per tester, and an adoptable, scalable tool that costs less for the team to be able to move forward. So again, our goal is to help find a way for you to move fast, increase velocity, increase quality, reduce costs, and reduce risk. I'm going to hand it over to Chris now, and Chris is going to show you what that looks like from a broad level perspective and how we actually operate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Russ. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to start off with Katalon Studio as our creation engine for our test cases. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you guys can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So what we're going to be doing today is that I'm first going to be creating a simple test case within our Katalon Studio environment. And then from there, we're going to parameterize it and showcase you through the API project they have ready for you today. And then we're going to send all of this results into our test ops instance. From there, we can discuss how we can do, remote execution, scheduling them out, looking at test results, as well as configuring a reoccurring test cloud execution as well. So with that being said, what we need to do for creating a test case, we simply need to go into the recording session. In the recording session for web applications, it asks you just two simple questions. Where do we start with the recording session? What's the URL for that? And what browser we want. Now, it should be said that if I want to record in Chrome and then play back in any other browser found here, whether that be Firefox, Edge, IE, or if you want to use another machine or test cloud for a virtual environment for Safari or vice versa, you can incorporate that as well. For today, I'm just going to record inside of Chrome, and I'm going to click on it and create a new test case. Well, once I update my driver, for instance, but that should just take a quick second. So we establish our recording session. Notice now that our application under that URL and browser that we chose is already up for us. I'm also going to be clicking on this expand view so that we can actually start seeing I'm just going to delete this step and delete this step. This is going to be our test script as we are recording it. So if we were to interact with our application, just know that as we interact with it, we have our test script being made for us in real time. And also, as I am entering in this information, the information is being, I'm just going to copy and paste this. The information is actually being saved for us. And if you want to modify your test script at any point in time while you're in this recording session, like I am going to after this, you can do so. So I had two steps. I can simply highlight one and delete the step simply by going here, clicking on delete, or highlighting it and clicking on remove. Okay. From here, we can also interact with a wide range of other, web UI elements, drop-down boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, calendar kind of base UI, and of course, your typical text fields. Once we interacted with all this application, we've essentially created a base case that we can expand on or essentially cover a main feature, which in this case is to simply make an appointment. If we wanted to save the script, all we need to do is simply click here. And then we're going to be asked a number of questions. This right now is asking us for saving our object identifications in object repository. Now I have made previously a test case against this application, and it's highlighting it red. When we highlight these objects, that means it already exists, and we are given three options. Do we want to merge the changes into the existing objects? Do we simply want to create a duplicate of it, or do we want to replace the existing object? In this case, I'm just going to simply click OK to replace all of them. And we give it a new name, make appointment. We can give it a description as well as a tag. Now, this tag feature is brand new into our 8.3.0 features. So if you want to give it the make appointment tag, you will be able to create something called a dynamic test suite, where you can actually start making these test suites, which are a collection of test cases purely based on these tags. In this case, I'm just going to say make appointment and click OK. As you can see here, our test script is made for us in our manual perspective. If we want to switch to the scripting perspective, which is a GUI-based language, which is a flavor of Java, you can simply switch between the two. However, that is not needed for creating a test case in any fashion. It's just another way for your enabling your developers to actually create the test case in a more dev-centric fashion. Past that, a couple of other things is that we have our object repository. Object repositories, again, are just us storing references to the UI elements that we gain during our recording sessions. What you'll find out inside of our API calls is that our API projects is that the API calls will be stored here as well. Notice here that the actual file structure is fluid. So if you want to create a new folder, or if you wanted to add certain other objects inside here, you can do that as well and organize it to whatever structure makes sense to your company. From here, if we wanted to actually go into creating test suites, we can click new test suite. Now, there are three types: test suite collection, and dynamic test suite. Test suites are simply a simple collection of test cases where we can actually start focusing on data bindings and tying in points of data into variables for our test cases to be more data driven. Test suite collection is when we focus on not only that, but also the environments. So we take test suites, we put them together, and we are saying these environments are being launched on a specific browser type in case for our case of this application. And dynamic test suites, again, kind of referring to the tags capabilities, is where we actually collect test suites based off of tags. In this case, we can click here and say it's the new type. But we can also provide it a number of information like ID tags. In this case, I can say the tag would be, make an appointment, and that will bring up all of our test cases inside of our test case folder that have the make appointment tag. But in this case, we're just going to go back and create a simple test suite. Okay. And just show you how easy it is to add your test cases into here. Because our test cases have multiple files, we do have the option of doing many things. In this case, we can click on a full folder of test cases, as well as an individual one. Once we click OK, we can see them being added here. And if we want to, parameterize an individual test case, we can go into the data binding section. However, before we do that, I want to showcase you as well that our support for API projects as well. In this case, I am simply going to open up a sample API project. Let's call it API 123. Okay. We're going to simply save this for later. Now, inside of our API call, what is happening after I answer my question for test ops? We do have test cases as well. Those test cases do have an object repository, but again, API calls are being saved inside the object repository itself. And we also have a test suite. The test suite is going to be the same thing as we had in our other project. Actually, I'll just go into this already existing one. The main difference is that this project already has some variables and files that we can actually make reference to. These files are inside of our data file section, and this is where we can actually make references to external points of information that we want to utilize in our test case. If we were to create a new one, I can show you all the types of supported information like Excel sheets, CSV, database connections, internal, etc. And once we have that information, we will be able to pull information like this. This file is a list of users based off of age, username, passwords, and gender type. And from here, we are going to use this information to parameterize our create new user, which is an API call that takes all of these variables or all of these parameters and puts them into the variable in our API call. Now, the way we actually create these variables, if we were to go inside here, is simply in our variable section. And we simply create an add new variable, give it a name, give it a type, whether that be like string, number, or any of the other types we have, and a default value. This way we can actually start having a base default value so that if we, for whatever iteration of our test case, don't have an age or don't have, username and password, we will automatically have those features. In this case, it will be 25 for age or Mimi for username, so that we can actually make sure that these parameters or these API calls still take place and not have, are not able to continue based off of some test data. So now we have our variables and we have our data from our list of users. We go back to our test suite, and here we can actually start tying the two together. In this case, we are going to go inside of the age variable, and we're going to change the type. In this case, not the default value, which is 25, but a column of data inside of our file. That file, of course, is going to be our list of users. And when we say that, we want to say what column in the file of list of users do we actually want to take. In this case, I want to take the age column for the age variable. And that's it. That's all it takes to parameterize your test case. From here, you can obviously do it for all of your other variables. But just know that with that, we are now executing this test case from 1 time to 11 different times, each time with a different set of data. Now, once we have all this, and we have our previous project as well, we have our connection to our test op instance. This is simply done by going inside here and entering in your information for Katalon test ops. Simply put in the server URL, your email and password, and it will fetch for the information. Once you fetch for the information, you can then go into your test op instance, which we will now transition to, where we can answer a lot of important questions that would be hard from a manual perspective to do, which is how well are we actually testing? Now, we can focus on, looking at the reports themselves, like the individual test runs that we have for our test suites, but we can also start answering some important things like how well are we covering all of our requirements? How well are we actually being able to, hit our results, mark the number of test cases that are executing on a given day-to-day basis, weekly basis, release basis, etc. And this is all done through different infographics that we can provide you. Again, as you can see here, we can answer trends like execution trends, profiles, platform coverage even, and we can kind of give you a perspective on how well you're actually accomplishing this. For us looking into test runs individually, all we need to do is simply go into our test run section. And we can go down a little bit down further. And we can see that our test cases are actually being executed. And if we want to see the results of one, we simply need to go and click on the ID of it, scroll down a little bit further, and we can actually read the report itself inside of our test case. Now, on the right side here, a couple of things. If we have Jira integrated with us and we use Jira as a defect management, we can automatically create a defect in here so that we can send it to our Jira instance. In fact, we'll touch on this a little bit more when we go into the defects tab. But with that, we can actually, create a central location rather than, going between tabs one after another, just so that we, fulfill a simple thing of just making sure that we have a defect created. Any attachments we associated inside of the project, inside the test case when it's executing, things like screenshots, report files, anything in regards to visual testing, those base screenshots and comparison screenshots will be saved in here as well. And of course, if there is a problem with it, we also print out the error log for you to, kind of dive in and understand what's taking place in your given test run. So past that, let's go into kind of answering the higher level questions. So we have all of these information, all these data points of pass, fail, test execution. What big questions can we actually answer with that? Well, what we can do with requirements is that we can actually create somewhat of a traceability and test run coverage, infographic for you. In this case, what we see here is we see big boxes and small boxes. The bigger the box, the more test runs in that given space. The box itself is a feature or I should say requirement that we get from Jira. And so we can now tie a Jira requirement to a specific testing efforts with multiple test cases associated to that requirement, and then those test cases with test results. So the big box means that we have a lot of test runs, and the color shades means that we are doing well or not. In this case, one of the major features that we have in here is failing the test runs. So that's a really great thing to kind of point out to you in your testing efforts. Is not only am I able to identify these problems, but also I'm able to see how well we're covering all of our features as well. Of course, the exact opposite can be said. The smaller the box, the less testing is taking place. So now you can answer the question, great, let's imagine that all of this is green, but all of this is still kind of small. Now we need to figure out what are some features that we want to expand our test coverage on. What are some things that could actually utilize some more test cases or just test runs in general, so that we can actually, keep this into a more balanced view with all of these sharing the same amount of space. That's really great to have. Again, good like stand-up meeting kind of material. But another thing is traceability matrix. For those who are familiar with waterfall or for some other lifecycle management tools that are familiar with traceability matrices, really what we're trying to do is let you know the impact that is coming up in your future releases, as well as showcasing a lot of the capabilities of, showing the impact of your test results on your requirements. So in this case, we have a, apologies, we have a relationship, a one-to-many relationship, one being a requirement, the many being the test cases associated to said requirement. In this case, we actually start seeing a number of test cases right here, and the last time it was executed, the test results for it, as well as a defect associated to it. So now we can actually start answering even more questions. Let's say this this requirement is going to be on the next sprint of development. We can actually start answering the question of, okay, if we have this working on for the next sprint, now we need to make sure that we can actually verify that these 4 test cases from an automation perspective, are probably going to need some maintenance because things are going to change. And automation test scripts, the main hurdle for you guys to to achieve or to strive for that 100% test coverage is actually having the know-how for maintaining these test cases. So not only that, but we can also start seeing that end-to-end, perspective, defects into a test results into a specific test case, all the way back into a JIRA requirement. And again, if we were to click on any one of these, it will take us immediately to our JIRA instance, again, so that you do not have to, log into a JIRA instance and then find your way through their hierarchy to go to that specific defect. Instead, we just give you a live connection to it from here. What else do we want to go through? Let's go through test execution. Now, test execution is a good way to kind of look at your testing efforts as a whole. And we can actually start scheduling test runs as well. Scheduling test runs are a way for us to take all of our testing assets that we have stored inside of test ops, or actually have references to in test ops, and we can actually incorporate this this test run so it can execute on a periodic time frame. We can give it a name. We can just call this the healthcare test run. We have a list of script repositories. Now, script repositories are simply just a reference that we create inside of test ops, pointing to something like a Git repository or Git-like repository. Things like code commit, or through other repositories, we can make a reference to it as well. I'll show that to you after this. And then we select the type that we want, whether that be a test suite or a test suite collections. There are other things in regards to Katalon command generics, but those are not going to be covered today. The difference between test suite and test suite collections are the same difference between them in Katalon Studio. Test suites, we're focusing on one environment. In this case, we're going to say we want to run this on a specific environment, and we're going to run it within Chrome. If we were to go with our test cloud environment, that will be virtual. However, we can also select a local test environment as well. This is simply an environment that has a KRE license, or Katalon Runtime Engine, so that you can actually target some machine that has it, and you can remotely execute it. Not only that, but if we were to scroll down a little bit more, we can actually start configuring when do we want this to happen. So do we want this to occur right now? It's on the 14th, and it's at 8:00 a.m. We want to say that this takes place until the end of the month. Not only that, but we want to make sure it happens at 8:00 in the morning at the same exact time. From here, we can then say how often do we want this. Again, do we want this to happen every week? Do we want to have this happen every day, every hour, etc.? Every minute, even if you wanted to. And we can actually start repeating from that point on. If we go into the advanced settings, we can actually start tying this to a specific release of our application. Again, releases are ways for us to make sure that not only are we testing efficiently, but we're actually being able to meet our deadlines as well, and we're able to create these releases inside of test ops. Once created, we can then make a reference in our as this latest version of test ops, we are making a reference to our Jenkins pipeline, where we can then have this integrated into a CI/CD pipeline for basically any of your build steps created and be triggered off of anything like a developer committing code to a repository. And from there, we can actually just having these pipelines being executed from here, or just through test op itself, through that time frame that we created. One last thing, and then I'll pass it back to Russ, is first off the configurations, right? Configurations and test ops in general. Test ops is the central core of all the integrations, all the information, and how we pass that information off to other tools. Again, script repositories are us having a reference to your projects. In this case, I have a project saved for my healthcare application already saved here. And we can actually make a reference to it and make it so that we can actually create it in our test scheduled test runs. Two more things actually. For local test execution with test ops, you will need to install Katalon runtime engine as well as an agent. Agents are pretty straightforward. You simply just follow the instructions, and once you're done, you will be able to actually target that environment through test ops and do remote execution. And finally, integrations. Integrations are always an important part of our end-to-end impact as a platform. So what we provide you guys through our configuration integration tab is the ability to get information on how do I integrate with Katalon? How do I integrate with GitLab CI, GitHub Action, any of the other kind of major supported ones, AWS, Azure DevOps, etc. And we provide you with instructions on this as well. And this can help you guys, understand it. But if you have any other further questions in regards to integration standpoints, I do highly encourage you to watch one of our other video series, which is Katalon Tech Check, as well as our Katalon documentation website. And with that, I will pass it back to Russell and Gokul, who will finish up for the presentation. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you everyone for joining, and we look forward to the future webinar sessions. The next one that's happening is on the 21st of April at the same time. It would be around API testing. So if you really want to learn more about API testing and how Katalon does it, feel free to join us again. It would be the same exact invite that you signed up for, and you would get a reminder for the same. So thank you again for joining, everyone, and we look forward to hosting you through the entire series. Thank you, Russ, and thank you, Chris, for joining and presenting today. We really appreciate it.